Senator, you're a generally optimistic guy. Why is the jobs picture for the country so bleak?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with there's this tremendous uncertainty. I talk to small business owners in South Dakota, in my home state, and across the country, and there's all this capital sitting on the sidelines right now because people don't know what the rules are going to be. They see these tax increases looming on January 1st. They're concerned about all the regulations coming out of agencies like the EPA. The healthcare reform bill is imposing all kinds of new mandates on businesses. They're trying to figure out how that's going to impact their costs and whether or not they ought to continue to provide coverage or just pay the penalty and push them all into the government exchanges. There is tremendous uncertainty, and one thing that investors and small businesses don't like is uncertainty. And I think that's been created by this administration and this leadership in Congress that have created a lot of anxiety among small business owners and investors in this country about what the rules are going to be, what kind of an economic environment they're going to be operating in, and as a consequence of that, you're not seeing them investing and creating jobs.
Now, Senator, from the best information you have, when do you believe that people will feel better about the economy? When the economy will be clearly better? When the unemployment rate will be acceptable?
I think a lot of it has to do is when the economy starts expanding. To get unemployment down to an acceptable level, you have to be growing at around 4%, and right now we're not. We've got very anemic economic growth, and I think part of that is that the Democrats in charge here in Washington, the President and his leadership in Congress, have determined that you create jobs by expanding the government, and I think most Americans know that you create jobs by expanding the economy. And so I think the Americans will become more bullish, more optimistic about their future when these issues that I talked about earlier and a lot of this uncertainty is taken out of the equation. But until that time, I think there's just going to be this sort of anxiety among people in this country. And I think the other thing that's really important right now in terms of sending a message and sending a signal, because most Americans are seeing their family budgets shrink, a lot of small businesses are seeing their budgets shrink, they're having to do more with less, trying to figure out ways to become more productive with fewer employees. And I think what's really frustrating to most Americans is at a time like that to see their federal government grow. And I think this election, this midterm election, really is going to be about the size of government and the growth of government and people's frustration about the contradiction they see in their own lives and what's happening here in Washington, D.C. And I think it's important in terms of restoring their trust and their confidence that the federal government start taking steps to get spending under control and to start paying down this massive debt that we're piling on future generations.
Now, Senator, one of your daughters is in college, one of them recently graduated. What are your long-term concerns about the economic picture they'll face, their classmates, their family?
I'm really concerned about the debt that they have piled on them already. Every child in America under the age of 18 today has $114,000 their share of our federal debt.
Do you think it's possible that they can have better lives, or what is your concern for
Well,
that generation?
I'm concerned that theirs may be the first generation that has a lower standard of living, a lower quality of life than our generation had.
And is there something that your generation of politicians can do about that?
I think that what we have to be willing to do is to make the hard decisions that are necessary to build a better future for them. And that historically has been part of our heritage in this country. We've always been willing to sacrifice so that the next generation can have a better life. That was my grandfather who came here from Norway and my dad after him. And our generation has sort of adopted this view that, well, we'll just pass the bill on to the next generation. And we're asking the next generation to sacrifice because we haven't been able to live within our means. And that's a real concern for my two daughters, for all those families across America who are raising their children today. What kind of future are they going to have? What is our country going to be like for them? And is it going to offer the same sort of hope and opportunity and promise that we've been able to experience? And I think for my daughters, both of whom are now looking at one in the job market and another one that will soon be there, is are there going to be good jobs out there available to them when they get out of college?
Now, Senator, you've proposed what you call a common sense bill. It focuses on both budget reform and deficit reduction. What would that do to help the jobs picture?
I think that like I said before, I think that largely Washington's got to get its spending habits under control. And the overall economy is impacted obviously by what happens here in Washington with regard to what EPA does, what happens on tax policy and those sorts of things. But I also think it's really important for the federal government not to continue to take more and more out of our private economy to fund more and more expanded government here in Washington, D.C. And it strikes me at least that that's what the American people want to see at a time when they're having, as I said earlier, their budget shrink. I think that we've got to exercise fiscal responsibility here in Washington, D.C. I think the House and the Senate Republicans, if given the opportunity, are going to focus much like a laser on trying to get spending in Washington under control.
Senator, you have a pretty good job now, pretty nice office. What was your first job?
My first job was a busboy at Star Family Restaurant in Murdo, South Dakota. I made $1 an hour, and that's back before waitresses tipped out, so it was a real $1 an hour. But eventually the goal was to work hard in advance and move up the chain, and eventually I got moved up into the kitchen. I got to be a cook, and that's where the real money was. So $6 an hour, that was good money back in the day.